You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today we are looking at the top 18 players in fantasy basketball on a per game basis over the last 2 weeks. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. And this top 18 is a weird one. Again, I'm not looking at filters and dropping guys out. This is just what it is because some players deserve mention, so we can pass through why they appear in this list. But there are 3 guys, or 4 guys actually in this list, I think, who appear only playing like one game in that time. But breaking down that one game and working out why they're there, if it's sustainable, and what that means, is also an important factor as well. So let's talk about these guys. Unsurprisingly, at number 1, Jim Harden comes in 7 games, 36 points a game, 6 triples, 8 assists, 1.6 steals, 49 and 84. Like, he's just that far above everybody else for the course of this season, and that's unlikely to change. Much like we saw last season, he remains the number 1 fantasy basketball player, and I think I would have no problem with taking him number 1 really at any point until he proves me wrong. That's just how good this guy has been consistently over, 6-7 years. It's unbelievably good. At number 2, this is one of those players who's only played one game in the last 2 weeks. He's currently dealing with a knee issue and is questionable for the Wolves' next game, Karl Anthony Towns. In that one game, though, he scored 39 and 12 with 5 triples, 3 assists and 2 steals, and shot well from the field. Now, how worried are we about the knee with Towns? It is a marginal concern, but I don't think it's anything too long-term. Maybe he misses another 1 or 2 games. But for a guy that was criticised at points during this season and through his career, he is still the number 3 ranked player overall this season. He started out this season hot, dropped back off, but has been really solid. And again, the number 3 ranked player over the course of this season. Don't panic with the knee injury. Don't sell him for a bloke ranked 12th or anything like that. He should be considered a top 4 guy at worst as we move forward, and hopefully this knee issue isn't a long-term thing. The 3rd ranked player over the last 2 weeks is also a player that's played only one game, and that is the Baptist, John Collins. In that one game since his return from suspension, 27 and 10 with 2 triples, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. Richie Benno.
2 for 2.
Shot the ball well, and in the games he's played this season, which haven't been very many of them, he is the 16th ranked player on a per-game basis. I think he finishes this year close to a top 20 guy. The 35 minutes he played in that first game back is extremely encouraging, as are the defensive numbers, which we know completely disappeared last season. He's not going to average 2 steals and 2 blocks, of course, but just getting those numbers, and he's been much better at that this season. He should be a top 20 guy as we move forward, and looked really, really good out there, and I think he's going to be a second-round fantasy guy for many years to come. At number 4, the world. Hassan Whiteside is putting up massive numbers. Now, he is doing it by averaging only 16 points per game, which when you look at the rest of the top 8 players, no one else is even under. In fact, the lowest scorer out of the top 8 players is averaging 27 points per game, outside of Whiteside, who is averaging 16. But 17 boards, 4.2 blocks, 60% from the field and 79% from the line. So his numbers there's a lot of greens and a lot of reds on that. Massive for rebounds, huge for blocks, huge field goal percentage, but then no threes, no assists, no steals. We know what Whiteside does. The metrics love him because he puts up those big block numbers, which are a low volume category. So when he averages 4 and then the average over the league is 1, then that really does skew his number. We should not be looking at him as a 4th best player by any stretch of the imagination. Like, that's not the guy that you look at, but he can be that valuable. Now, over the course of the season, again, based on metrics, which have their deficiencies, no doubt, he's the 14th ranked player over the course of the season. Like, that is definitely
a surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
Like, I was pretty keen on him in the 50 to 70, 65 type range in the draft, but I couldn't expect this to happen. His free throw shooting, which was sub 50% last season, has jumped all the way back up, and he looks to be a solid free throw shooter now. The minutes have pushed up from where, at the beginning of the season, there were times when he was splitting minutes with Skal Labissière, and he was like 26 and 22, and you go, what's going on here? But now he's a 31, 32 minute a night guy. I'm not really worried about Yusuf Nurkic coming back at all for Whiteside, and he should be able to maintain really strong numbers for the rest of the season. At number 5, we have got the fun guy.
I'm a fun guy.
Not much to really say here with Kawhi. 30 points a game with 5 games. 9 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 1.4 steals, 52 and 93. This is just what he does. We know there's going to be concerns with the back-to-back situations. Maybe at some point he plays to back-to-back. I'm not actually sure he ever will play a back-to-back ever again with this degenerative quad and knee issue that he's dealing with, which is obviously an issue for him, and the way those tendons react to the extra stress with 2 games in 24 hours. But in terms of per-game numbers, he's fine. At number 6, Joel Embiid, the process. Putting up some good numbers again and really did punctuate it with a big game on Christmas, averaging 27 and 13, hitting 1.6 triples, 1.7 blocks, 51 and 88%. We thought Embiid could be on a per-game basis around this sort of a player this year. He's been a little bit disappointing, 12th overall over the course of the season. I think he can push back into that top 10, though, as the season goes on. A guy who is injured comes in here at number 7, Pascal Siakam. We don't know when he's returning from this groin injury, but in the 3 games he's played over the last 2 weeks, he's averaging 30 points, 4 assists, almost 5 triples a game, 2.3 blocks and 1.3 steals. Now, we had worries about his efficiency heading into this season and that legendary level he was at would drop down, and that absolutely has been the case. But he's made up for it with a spike in usage. We've seen over these last 3 games an increase back in his defensive numbers, which really dropped off last season. He is, though, the 23rd ranked player over the course of the season. I think we look at him more as a 3rd rounder versus a 2nd round guy in that 25 to 30 range. I think rather than him getting better than the 23rd, I think he can probably sit in that 25 to 30 type range. And when he eventually returns from injury, which we just don't know at this point. Tone Davis comes in at number 8 over the last 5 games, averaging 30 and 10 with almost 3 blocks, shooting 50 and 81, 1-3 a game. There's absolutely nothing to complain about with those sort of numbers from Davis. He is the number 2 ranked player over the course of the season. He's going to be a top 3 to top 4 guy for the rest of the year. Really, really strong numbers, and just a little bit below, or what's more, the other guys have jumped up ahead of him over this recent time frame, and he would be much higher than this normally. And the number 9th guy, this is one of those weird ones, the big mitten, Gary Payton Jr. Only 1 game, played 34 minutes, 10, 11, and 5 with 6 steals. Now, those 6 steals obviously push him way up the rankings. This is not indicative of where he's going to be. I don't think he's even worth a 12-team stream, especially with Jordan McRae back for the Wizards today. I'm recording this before Thursday's game. He won't play 34 minutes a night. He won't get 6 steals a night. He won't get 11 rebounds a night. He won't get 10 points a night. He won't do any of these things for the rest of the season. So while maybe you take a flyer on him as a streamer for Washington on Friday, or on Thursday, sorry, I just don't see anything lasting. But it is worth mentioning because his name came up by a lot of people. Do I add Gary Payton Jr.? What do I do? People dropping crazy options here. Do I drop Davis Bertans to add the big mitten? Like, no, you don't. Especially when you might not ever get another game like this out of Payton ever again in his entire life. The next one we have a look at, Big Chungus, Nikola Jokic at number 10. He's starting to roll at the moment. He is only the 24th ranked player over the season. He will be better than that as we move forward. 22, 10, and 8. Still, the defensive numbers aren't there, but the shooting numbers, which were way off, have jumped back up, and he's shooting 49% from 3 over the last 2 weeks. That'll come back and normalize. If you can get just mid-30s in 3-point shooting from Jokic, I think you end up being pretty happy with that overall. The next guy we look at, Chris Paul, comes in at number 11, averaging 18, 5, and 7, almost 2 steals, 59 and 91. So there's some room for that to drop back off. He's the 31st ranked player over the course of the season. You could have got him in the 50s in most drafts. I thought in per game he could push towards the top 20. He's not far off that. Hasn't been injured so far this season. I don't think he's going to be traded by the Thunder. He's been really, really good after a slow start, and I think he continues to be strong as the season goes on. The next bloke we look at, Jordan McLaughlin, another one like Gary Payton, only 1 game, but had 19, 2, and 4, 3 steals, 3 triples, 54%. That was a game that Shabazz Napier was out and that the Wolves were getting punked by the Warriors, so the whole bench just played big minutes in the second half. So that is important to know, because when you go through and look at rankings, you go and see this and you go, shit, McLaughlin, do I need to go and add him? And the answer is no. He is a 2-way player who had a really strong game, looked good in Summer League as well. But again, Teague, Napier, Culver, who's trash at the moment, they're all ahead of him in the rotation. And this is just one of those fluky type performances that landed him on this list, but it's worth mentioning anyway. Stormin Norman Powell was excellent before his injury. In the 3 games prior to that, 20 points per game, 3 triples, 4 rebounds, 3 assists on 62% shooting. What's his number 1 category in that time? field goal percentage. So that is going to drop off. 59% from three. His second best category was his three-point shooting, the 3.3 triples a game. So when the field goal percentage drops, when the three-point percentage drops, his numbers are going to drop. Over the course of the season, he's the 91st ranked player. He's now out for a few more weeks with this shoulder injury. I think that that shooting was never going to maintain at that level. He probably is a drop in 10-teamers and probably in 12s, but it depends who you've got to add. The next guy we look at here at number 14, Trae Young. This is just sort of what he does. 34, 6 and 8, 1.3 steals, 41 and 82. Hopefully the efficiency comes back up with Collins there, but this is sort of where he was projected to be drafted. He's the 8th ranked player over the course of the season. He's in that 8 to 15 type range. Next up, Andre Drummond, the big avocado. The 15th ranked player over the last 2 weeks, 21 and 13, a block, 3.4 steals, 61 and 52. He's still hurting your free throws. That free throw issue, which was fixed, and it was fixed to a degree, it's not fixed enough to make him not an issue from the line over the course of the season. He's 11th so far this year over the course of the year. And again, 15th here. This is just more of the same from Andre Drummond, the big avocado. Next up, Bradley Beal. The 16th ranked guy, again, more of the same from him. 19th over the course of the season, averaging 31, 6 and 6. The field goal percentage has been rough from Beal, but you punt that. He's a first-round type of guy. Big free throws, big volume, 82% on over 9 attempts per game. You're getting decent assists, strong rebounds, 1.8 steals. Really, I don't know what more you could ask from what Beal is currently doing. The last two guys in my list here.
Percentages.
Really thriving without Luka Doncic in the last 6 games, 22 and 13. But of course, Doncic returns to action on Thursday, so let's see how much Porzingis can maintain. 2.7 blocks, 42 and 80, usage up at 27. Let's see how that looks over the next few games. And then lastly, at number 18, Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. Only 29 minutes a game, 29, 12 and 6, 1.3 steals and 0.9 blocks, which is actually down for him, especially those blocks. 52 from the field, also down from him. And of course, the absolutely piss-poor free throw percentage, 63% on almost 9 attempts, which makes him as big of a negative as what Drummond is in that category, and Drummond shooting 52%, but the difference is 5 attempts versus 8.6 attempts. Giannis, of course, if you're punting free throws, you would move way up that list. He's also hitting 2 threes a game over the last 7 games and doing it at 35%. His three-point shooting has been significantly better over the month of December. If we just round out the top 24, Brandon Ingram's at 19, Dennis Schroeder at 20, the Beetle Paul George at 21, Bam Bam Adebayo at 22, Russ Westbrook at 23, and then Kyle Lowry comes in at number 24. That'll do it for me in this mini episode looking at the top 18 players in fantasy basketball. Subscribe to this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. Give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, tell your friends, share it, all of that stuff, and follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.